Well, guys, we've been really focused on the results of the 2024 election here in America, but I think we also need to talk about the fact that due to global inflation, not just America's, or what was, the inflation wasn't just in America, it was global. And due to that fact, there was a lot of unhappiness with the left-leaning incumbents over the last 4 years. And because of that, across the world, we have seen the far-right parties in respective countries dominating in their elections, particularly this year. And America is obviously a great example of this, as you might imagine, but believe it or not, the Dems in America performed the best of any progressive party in most elections, or I think maybe any election, of any Western country this year. This has been a global failure for progressive politics, not just in America. And because of that, there are not just American YouTubers making videos about these election results. There are also, well, in this case, Russian ones making videos about it, talking about the fact that Gen Z is entering a world in some parts of their own making. You got to consider Gen Z did sway a little for Trump, particularly Gen Z men. But overall is not of their making. That Gen Z is basically trapped and somewhat fucked. Now, maybe I'll disagree with some points made in the video, but overall I think it's going to be a pretty good one. Nfuckers here, NFKRZ, very good name, is a Russian YouTuber, pretty progressive. He's debated Nazis. He's made videos calling out Russia's, politics and its, very nationalist side, calling out, Putin and stuff like that. Because once again, even though I do a lot of discussion about how, quote-unquote, Russia is bad, I want to make very clear that I'm not, monolithizing Russia into some, evil boogeyman. Russia is a country, it's got a population of people, and there are plenty of people living in Russia who are Russians that drive to work in the morning passing those Z flags hanging up on people's houses, and they roll their eyes and think, fucking ignorant assholes. Just like we do when we see a Trump sign in someone's yard. So, with that said, let's go ahead and let's hop in and watch this video, The Powerless Generation. Go ahead and comment on this video, by the way, if my editor forgets to leave a link to it in the description, and I'll go ahead and pin a comment after the fact. It happens. Sometimes it gets forgotten. I want to make sure we're crediting the video, so just let me know if I forget, or if my editor forgets, I should say, and I'll get to it as soon as possible. But let's check this out. The Powerless Generation, Gen Z.
We are currently living in a pretty tumultuous time in world history. There are quite a few huge conflicts happening in the world, and also huge elections, including of course the US election, which the entirety of the world is always looking at. And overall there's a lot of stress, anxiety in the air, a lot of emotions. And among those emotions, something that I feel like a lot of you guys can relate to is feeling powerless, or in particular feeling powerless against your own government, or an authoritarian system of power, which just does whatever it wants with no repercussions, and you cannot really do anything to combat it or to change it, even though you—
Correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, I think Nfuckers has had to flee Russia. Not, had to, as far as I'm aware, but, could not stand being there after, well, A, the sanctions, but also all of the far-right politics that have been taking over. I think he literally left, and he's in Europe now. He may be back, though, because, immigration rules, he might have had to come back. But I know he was, in Georgia for a while, I believe.
You might live in a seemingly democratic country.
The country, Georgia.
And especially in the United States, a lot of people are feeling like they're annoyed of the American two-party system, and they're annoyed of having to essentially choose between the lesser of two evils every single time. Americans and people in tons of other countries in the world.
Alright. Like I said, there might be some things about this video I disagree with, and this is one of them. I think we have to kill this concept of voting for a lesser of two evils. I am going to be completely honest, that mindset is one held primarily by people who are too lazy to educate themselves and, the Dem administration. even I fell into this trap when I was a younger and less skilled and knowledgeable content creator than I was. You saw earlier when I was scrolling through my old catalog of videos, I had some videos shitting on Biden during the primaries back in the day, on like pretty unfounded claims, you know? Like they were mostly just like on tier with like the Biden sniffing hair stuff that the right blew up during his presidency. There's just this like, especially with young progressives, and I used to be like this tendency to default jump to hating this like seemingly establishment Democrat. But covering the presidency of Biden and the vice presidency of Harris, it really would not be a lesser of two evils situation. I really have found that more often than not, progressives I speak to that don't like Biden or don't like Harris tend to not know a lot about what they did in office or their policies. And I don't know if that's necessarily their fault, because the media does not give a lot of attention to how good of a job the sitting Dem is doing. Like, how many of you guys knew how much Obama recovered our country while he was president? If you're like an older person who watched the media a lot, like the media was probably one of like the most favorable to Obama out of any Dem president I can imagine. And I don't really remember. I remember the Dem media constantly picking and prodding at Obama, trying to find weaknesses and calling out shortcomings. And maybe that's a positive of the left. Don't get me wrong. It is good that we hold our progressive candidates accountable. You know, 3 years out of a Dem term, we should be protesting and calling for change. But we can't protest and call for change and actually get anything out of it under a Republican. They don't care what we're protesting for. Dems want to win over our votes, and they will move their platform in order to try and do that. And that is what Biden did. Biden's actual presidency was so much more progressive than what he ran on. And I really don't think we're ever going to be able to motivate enough turnout to reliably win elections and keep Republicans out of power if we are going to push this idea that it's a lesser of two evils vote. It's just not. It's just not. It's just an underinformed take. Or an uninformed take, I guess I should say. Like, don't get me wrong, I have plenty of criticisms for the Dems, but like, dog, it's so night and day, and not even like the Republicans are so bad that it makes the Dems look like angels by comparison, but distill the conversation and look at the policies Biden passed. Like, hell, Biden literally, had Harris been elected, we would not have a coal industry in America by 2030. If you don't know, coal was 80% of America's carbon footprint every year. We would have literally taken out 80% of America's carbon footprint by 2030 with one single signed order by Biden. How many of you didn't even know Biden did that? How many of you knew that didn't even know Biden protected thousands of acres of land in Alaska from mining and drilling and turned it into federal protected land? How many of you knew that Biden has like heavily invested in American oil in areas that are not negatively affected by the oil drilling to the same extent, like up in Alaska and in the Gulf, where it like fucks shit up, or buying oil from overseas where we end up, you know, kind of being reliant on other countries? Like, but how many of you guys knew about this stuff? It's too boring for most of you guys to have known about it unless you were watching my content. Or Biden capping the price of insulin at $35, something that was like one of the most popular talking points on the left for a while. The Dems can actually be moved over with protest, but if we don't spend the year leading up to the election putting our all into explaining to the American people what a good job they've done representing us for the 3 years before, then we are not going to win. And then for the next 4 to 8 years, when the conservatives are in power, you can protest and do your direct action as much as you like, but no one's listening. You're just doing it to waste your own breath. No one's fucking listening unless you've got progressive candidates in power. I don't like this mindset. Well, to be fair, maybe for Nafuckers in his country, it's a lesser of two evils thing, but here in America, we really got to kill that mindset. In the UK, that mindset needs to be killed. That's the mindset that made the Brexit vote won on, okay? That's the mindset that Hillary lost from. The mindset that won Trump the election this time. We have to stop enforcing this idea unless you can really genuinely substantiate why you consider the Dem candidate an evil.
Feel like they cannot really do anything about their country or their governments and where it's going, and in this video, Roman, your favorite neighborhood Russian. I'd like to try to relate to you guys a little bit because, you know, being from Russia, I do know a thing or so about feeling powerless against your own governments. That's kind of our entire history, you know what I'm saying? I want to talk about how a lot of people today, and especially Gen Z, feels very powerless and feel like they have no impact and they're very insignificant in the grand scheme of things and in the system of their country. So, what am I talking about? I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys are aware the election in America is happening, the entirety of the world is tuning in and watching it as a TV show. You know, it's Russians' favorite pastime, actually, to check out what is happening in American elections because you guys actually have elections that kind of matter. Barely, though. Let's be real, that's what we're talking about.
I do love this. I do love how, like, as an American, the whole rest of the world watches us, and we're, like, the main characters. Like, y'all foreigners are all biting your nails, like, down to the fucking flesh, scared of what decision the almighty American people will make next. Who will we elect? And how bad is it going to crash your country's economy because it relies on the US dollar too? Man. Well, maybe not Russia, but like, man. I don't know if Nafuckers is back in Russia. I genuinely don't know.
In this video. Yes, everybody's going crazy. Trump visited McDonald's. They just released the Trump versus Kamala epic rap battle of history. For me as an outsider who's looking at what America...
Hold on, did the Trump epic rap battle of history predict the election outcome? Because doesn't the loser always go first, and in that one Kamala Harris went first? Trump went first? Oh, okay, never mind. Man, they got it wrong for the first time.
Are saying on social media, it almost feels like barely anybody who wants to vote for Trump or Kamala actually likes them. And everybody's like, yes, sure, they're not great, but... And that's kind of how it goes for a lot of...
There's a failure of communication, pretty much entirely. This is why the left has to build out, like, actually reasonable creators to have a massive platform, such that, like... Granted, I don't expect Nafuckers to know how good of a candidate Kamala or Biden really were, and I don't expect... But I do expect a lot of, like, lefties in America to know. I expect them to try to find out. And it is so frustrating to me how little interest there was in finding out. I know because I did a lot of content about it. And how angry and, like, repulsed people on the left would get if you said, hey, did you know about Biden's, like, pro-union? No, what are you doing? He's pro-genocide. It's like, well, he's actually, like, put forward, like, 10 ceasefire proposals to Netanyahu, who keeps rejecting them because Trump tells him to keep refusing. Like, how can you let the guy who is telling Netanyahu to never accept a ceasefire deal from Biden get elected and perceive it as though Biden is equally bad? The fact is, many of them didn't even know that, because this information is locked behind content that they, I guess, find quite boring. We've got, like, an information war we've got to win within the left and broadly. It's actually insane how much work we have to do.
People. Or also a lot of people in America feel like they're not even represented in this election because, for example, a big deal breaker for them is that Kamala, just like Trump, is pretty much very pro-Israel. And it's the same on the conservative side. Like, a lot of people are not necessarily huge...
So America as a whole is pro-Israel, and what does he mean by pro-Israel? Like, Israel is a country that has a right to exist. You can unsub for me if you think I'm wrong there, but there are people born in Israel that should not be, like, deported to, like, I don't know, wherever their parents went and have the, like, country dissolved or whatever. I do not think that should happen. That is a borderline genocidal argument, in fact, I would actually suggest. On par with Vosh saying that Israel should be carpet bombed, which is genuinely what a lot of lefties believe. Vosh Fed posting and saying he wants Israel carpet bombed or nuked or whatever back in the day, what got him banned from Twitch, that was him accidentally dropping the mask on what he truly wants for Israel and its people as retaliation for an ideological bent of, like, preferring Palestinians to live over Israelis. So when I tell you guys that, like, the mindset of hating Israel as much as a lot of lefties do is it's gone beyond the reasonable point of opposing the IDF and Netanyahu's nationalist, genocidal, and war crime actions against the Palestinian civilians, that shit is a real problem. Like, she's pro-Israel. What the fuck do you mean? Yeah, it's a country we're allied with that we gain a lot from being allied with. Like, what? I'm predicting Xander Hall is going to be pro-Zionism by March 2025. Well, if being anti-Zionism means you believe that all Israeli civilians should have to either be deported from that land or killed, then I guess so. Also, mind you, this response comes out when I talk about people being opposed to carpet bombing Israel. So yeah, like you got to, like, to be very clear right now, there are genuinely a lot of lefties who are just like, they want to kill all the Israelis. Like, they want to see all the Israelis dead. What flavor is your chapstick? Mint. It comes from my dentist. It's just like part of my little go bag during my I get after my little dentist appointment. Yeah. Anyway, like, seriously, the criticisms of Israel should be criticisms of a country's foreign policy, not criticisms of it as like an illegitimate state full of a people that are all like a monolithic, like, army of nationalistic demons or whatever that deserve to die. That is how lefties talk about this shit. Like the far left, that are like advocating for not voting for Biden and stuff. Like being, yeah. It's a really bizarre mindset. I genuinely wonder if it's just straight up anti-Semitism. A lot of Jewish people are like massively opposed to leftist content online, and publicly so, because they see it as anti-Semitism. So, yeah. Israel is a colony. Colonies should not exist in the modern world. Rhodesia was dissolved as a state. Okay, so yeah, you guys actually want to kill these people. Okay, yeah. So yeah, we're probably going to be dropping mass bans on the people that are like, Israel as a state needs to be dissolved, because these are actually anti-Semites. Like, these people actually just want to genocide Jews, but from the left. Which is, to be fair, makes sense considering Hassan backs the Houthis, who have death to the Jews in their flag and stuff. So I think this is just a bunch of the left throwing in with, like, Islamic extremist anti-Semitism, because like clearly you guys are not concerned about like Palestinian civilians getting bombed when you hear someone like talk about how that's the problem, but then it's not enough for you, or it's like you still have a problem. Like, clearly that isn't your issue. Yeah, these people are letting the mask slip. I think it's bad when the civilians get bombed regardless of what country or people they hail from, actually. I think they're just innocent kids and civilians and shouldn't get bombed, even if they're Israeli, especially if they are fucking children. Wait, I already said children. Redundant. I said civilians should not get bombed, especially if they are children. So, yeah. Pretty consistent take. Just ban the Hassan dumb fucks? Exactly, Grazatridon. But like I said, this is a poison spreading through the left. And like I said, Nafuckers, not even an American progressive, not immune to it.
Fans of Trump either. And again, looking at what Americans are saying, it feels like a lot of Americans are actually questioning whether this really is a democracy at this point. Basically, a lot of people are feeling like they don't matter right now, and, you know, I'm kind of a pro-Western Russian, but still, inside of me, there is a bit of a, you know, desire to almost make fun of it, because, well guys, I don't mean it in any bad way, but the thing is, I've actually received quite a lot of shit from Westerners online, from America and many other different countries, especially after the war of Russia and Ukraine started, the full-on conflict in 2022 in February. I've gotten comments and personal messages with like the most unhinged stuff possible, where most people would just insult me, say that Russians are like all—
Wait, Fanatic? Why would you ban Fanatic? Their take was fine, Redux. The take of Israel being a colony is pretty cringe, because Israel is a country, but it does have colonies, and they do expand out with settlements which are genuinely evil. Israel's settlement building is literally just claiming more land from people, moving settlers in, prompting the locals that got their land taken to attack the settlers, so that the IDF can justify military response wiping out all of the remaining people on the land that they can allege had anything to do with the attacks on settlers. The settlement building is absolutely evil, and a completely, like, Israel has no right to expand its borders whatsoever. Israel has the right to exist with whatever borders it holds at like a moment. I don't think it, like, although it should give up some of that settlement land for sure. Yeah, a lot of it actually. That's like been like freshly claimed, you know. But outside of that, like, Israel as a area that exists should be allowed to exist, and as a country and people that exist should be allowed to exist, because it has for decades now. There are countless people that have been born there and grown up there. Obviously. I hate that we're getting, like, into fucking, like, Israel shit right now, because it got brought up for a second and people in chat are arguing. But, like I said, unbanned Fanatic. Their take was good. The settlement stuff is evil. Yeah, that is there's no defending the Israeli settlement expansion. So you think it's an Israel leadership issue then? Israel's a country! Yes! Just like Russia or China. Yes, Israel's a country. They have elected shitty nationalist politicians. They have a population that is both anti-war. You realize they have riots and massive protests there against the genocide in Gaza, right? Because there are people there that love their country but do not love what their country is doing to innocent people, just like in America. Like, America isn't evil because a bunch of people here decide to line their own pockets and vote for Trump. It doesn't make every American pro-Trump and thus make it an invalid state. Good God, people, think with some nuance. Yes, literally every problem in the world is a leadership problem. Exactly. The people are not to blame. Even the people who elect the shitty leadership. The problem that is usually to blame is bad education, ignorance, and propaganda.
Slaves that want to bow down to the Tsar or whatever, and that if actually I was a decent person, then I would be out on the streets like overthrowing Putin right this very moment, with my own bare hands by myself. Once again, I'm supposed to overthrow the entire government and stop the war by myself. And if I don't do that, then I'm a slave or whatever. And the thing is, right, you know, to send those messages...
How hard would it be to take out Putin, though? Like, legit, like, if you really had no care about your own life, how hard would it be to take out Putin? Do you think he's, like, more guarded than, like, other world leaders? Or do you think it's, like, relatively... You think you could challenge him to a 1v1 and he'd accept? I feel like if you challenged him to a 1v1 in front of the crowd and he didn't accept, or he'd have to accept, right? Like, just a full-on pistol duel, like, in the fucking Moscow square, surrounded by, like, 1 million Russians just all watching as their world leader engages in a Wild West, like, pistol duel. That would go hard as... fuck. That should be how Putin has to maintain his leadership. He has to stay strong-looking by accepting every fight he is challenged to in front of the town square. He'd fight unfairly? Well, Putin wouldn't need to fight unfairly. Like, Putin's got a lot of training. Putin's a really good shot, I have no doubt. He was, like, some kind of, like, super special forces assassin, like, SEAL Team 6 of Russia type shit, right? So, yeah, he was like a spy. So he wouldn't need to cheat. Yeah, he was like KGB. So yeah, he wouldn't need to cheat. It would be like, you would just send in some, like, CIA dude who's, like, top of the line and go have him challenge Putin in the middle of Moscow to a pistol duel. That would go so hard.
You kind of have to think kind of highly of yourself, to think that you are actually able to stand up against the tyrannical governments and...
Hold on, Snake Lover, only 164 likes on the stream? Really? Really, we got 328 people watching right now and only 164 likes in the stream. Damn, no wonder YouTube's not telling people that I've gone live. Hit that like button if you haven't already. You're not doing your part if you haven't. Make sure you do your part. Do it like the Starship Troopers meme. I'm doing my part, and hit that like button. Never forget. It's very important. It takes half a second and it's totally free. Hit that thumbs up.
Do something that will make a very big difference. That is gonna change everything. However, once again, as we're seeing for most people, for most regular people in America or in any other country that I would, be talking about today, when you take a regular person, it's almost like they have no agency and no input, and people are feeling very powerless. And yes, in America you can do way more than you can do in Russia. It may be a flawed democracy, but it is a democracy nevertheless. Russia, I'm not really so sure, it pretends to be one. And I'm not trying to say that Russia and America are basically the same. They're not, but a lot of regular people from either country at the end of the day kind of feel the same. Like, they have absolutely zero say in what is going on. Another reason why I wanted to make this video also is because there's also actually currently an election happening in the country of Georgia, the post-Soviet country in the Caucasus region where I actually lived for 2 years.
Let's see if it ends up swinging right as well. Remember, it's global inflation, and Georgia doesn't have high wages to begin with, so if the inflation's gone up there as well, it could really harm any progressive incumbent that was in that country as well. We could see a red swing, or I guess a conservative swing in Georgia as well in its upcoming election, no doubt.
Myself, and it actually was the country that I left to after I left Russia. I lived in the city of Tbilisi for 2 years. I absolutely fell in love with the country and the people and the culture. It's great.
Pretty.
And that place is in my heart forever for sure. You guys see this little hat right here? gift from Gatsu. Very nice, very nice. I like it.
Georgia's
Anyway,
election
if
was
you guys
rigged.
follow what is going on in post-Soviet countries and kind of that entire region of the world, Eastern Europe in general, you might know that the country of Georgia since about 2004 had a very strong pro-Western, pro-European sort of strategy. But actually, the current ruling party of Georgia, that is called Georgian Dream, is essentially being described by a ton of people as like a puppet party of Russia. And what's been going on recently is that Georgia's sort of movements towards possibly joining European Union and so on, they've been kind of stifled by the government because they've actually signed a few laws recently that are basically kind of the same laws we have in Russia, like the
So I've heard this stuff about this, like Russia rigging the Georgian election in order to get sympathetic politicians in power that want to bring Georgia back into the fold with Russia. There was ballot stuffing literally caught on camera. That's wild, dude. Man, listen, I'm not playing into any of the conspiracies, but I'm curious to see if in the coming months anything actually concrete from any genuinely reputable source comes out about fuckery that happened in this election, because even though the results make sense in hindsight, they also seem a little odd, you know? Like, I think people are still kind of trying to believe the results. Like, even if the results make sense, they're still trying to believe them, you know? Because it's like, man, really? I guess so, but really?
foreign agent law, and also they recently banned LGBT propaganda in media, just like Russia did in like 2013, and recently they banned it for all ages. So and a lot of Georgians, and especially young Georgians, they're actually very invested and very interested in Georgia possibly joining European Union and having more cooperation with Europe. But what's happening right now is that Georgia is kind of steering more towards Russia as opposed to Europe, which many Georgian people obviously are not fans of, because Russia literally went to war with Georgia in 2008. So there's always constant process in Tbilisi. For example, when I lived there was some very big process actually related to this exact foreign agent law, sort of against this like Russian influence. And Georgia just now had the parliamentary election, and what happened is that this, ruling party, Georgian Dream, won. And obviously this kind of shattered the, the hopes and dreams of a lot of young Georgian people right now, and a lot of people are feeling also pretty powerless right now about the situation in their country, and I'm sure there are going to be huge protests and so on, right? Only time will tell what's going to happen.
Dude, it really is a scary situation globally. Like, the world follows America. In this case, it seems more like America followed the world. Man, we really need to know now in the future how much of a predictive factor an incumbent presiding over any turmoil globally really is. Like, it's such an easy predictor for election results, I guess. I would have never thought so. I didn't think enough people cared enough. I don't think they did in 2016. I think it's more of a recent thing, like the last two elections, where the vibes are massively impactful on who gets elected. And I think we've only had two elections to feel it and understand that this is the new status quo, is that elections are won and lost by vibes. And, we're going to have to work to make the vibes go to our favor. And to some extent, it's out of our control, and to a degree, we just need to be able to learn to read the vibes and predict what's coming before it arrives. Because we just weren't good at reading the vibe that Trump was gonna win this time around. I had the vibe that he would lose pretty hard, actually, legendarily hard. Clearly, my vibe-o-meter was off
there. But yes, this is also another place in the world right now where people are kind of feeling powerless and quite frustrated with where the country is going, and they feel like they almost can't affect it. It's something that's been going on for quite a few years, right? And actually the truth is that a lot of the times, protests or certain attempts of the people to speak out against the governments, a lot of the times they fail, and they end up in...
We've got we got another anti-Semite genocider in chat, but this time they donated to me. Zan, why do you pretend that wanting Israel to not exist means that you want all Israelis dead, Zan? Is it that hard for you to imagine a single Palestinian state where everyone's equal? Okay, so you either want the state of Israel dissolved and for it to all be one big Palestinian state where now Jews of Israel, ex-Israeli citizens, live as citizens in a state controlled by a people that they just got done colonizing and genociding. Okay. I'm sure that won't go well, as it historically, it always goes well for the Jews when they're a population in a country where a group that does not like them wants to control. Also, you understand that the current ruling leadership in Gaza are Hamas, who are allied with the Houthis, both parties having the term "death to the Jews" in their like catchphrase slogan. I know it's not in English, so you don't know what the fuck you're supporting, but that is what they stand for. You cannot make the Israelis be citizens of a country that is probably going to be operated by leaders from Hamas or even like allies of the Houthis. So on top of that, let's say you want to dissolve Israel as a country and then send the Israelis elsewhere. When exactly were lefties in favor of deporting people from the land they were born in? Why do you have to throw the allegation of being in favor of a colonialist state when you're doing the same thing that Hassan's community does to Ethan Klein, where he says, "Yeah, I'm really not in favor of what the IDF is doing. I don't like this guy in particular, but at least he was a moderating voice trying to de-escalate and stop the war in Israel. But Netanyahu fired him because he doesn't like dissonant voices." Wait, you think that guy was good? You know, he was a war criminal, right? It's like, well, I just said I don't like him or the IDF or what it's doing. I said that I liked that he was trying to de-escalate and stop the war, and I don't like that Netanyahu fired him because Netanyahu is a war criminal and a maniac who doesn't want anyone who's even slightly less radical than him in his way and his government, and that's something worth criticizing. Instead, it has to be like, you're actually in favor of that person? Like, dude, we're purging these people, dude. We're purging these people. Yeah, no, the horseshoe theory stuff has been obviously real for years now, Ride the Rails. I'm definitely starting to see how much of like the anti-Israel left are just like lefty anti-Semites. Which makes sense. Like, anti-Semitism is the most popular bigotry in the world. It would make sense that there is like a brand of it for the left.
Nothing, or worse than that, a lot of the times if these processes fail, they actually end up making the situation quite worse and quite more harsh and strict. Because also in this context, a lot of people always compare the 2013-2014 revolution in Ukraine, which was a huge event, of course, but, you know, a ton of people are comparing Ukraine in 2014 to modern Russia, essentially, and saying how, you know, Russians, specifically, you know, slaves or whatever, who just want to bow down to the Tsar because they're not able to create like a protest as good as the Ukrainians did to, you know, actually topple the government or whatever. But there are a lot of things that happened in Ukraine that, you know, just made everything go right for the protesters, so to say, right? Ukraine is still way more of a free country than Russia, way less of a police state than Russia, and also the anti-government forces in Ukraine kind of all joined powers against the president and the government, so, you know, it was just an epic win. But it didn't happen that way in Russia, and it didn't happen that way in Belarus, for example, even though it seemed like, you know, something crazy was going on, because a lot of people are not aware of this. A lot of people are saying that Russians never protest and they never tried to rebel or whatever, but there's been some very, very huge protests in Russia over the years, even during Putin's time in power, that actually...
I love this. Like, the entire theme of this video is like, hey, it turns out that every country has a population of, like, civilians that are... their positions on what their country's foreign policy is differs massively.
Kind of low-key had the government on the edge of their seats. For example, the biggest one by far was around 2011. The protests were absolutely massive, but they were essentially squashed and mismanaged, and, you know, there's just a lot of bad stuff. And, you know, people in Russia have been protesting for decades and decades and decades. And they've always been met with, you know, police brutality and the police becoming only harsher on free speech and so on, right? So, a more recent example is, once again, the country of Belarus, also a country that is post-Soviet, that borders Russia, that is currently heavily influenced by Russia, and, you know, is kind of considered by many people
Wait, no shot. Ethan Ralph might have died live on stream. Nick Curves, if that's true, I've got somebody who would absolutely know. Absolutely. No. She's not posted anything about it. She would know ASAP. I've got a friend who would be like, Yo! Ethan Ralph just died on stream! I would know immediately.
To be kind of almost a
I would
puppet.
have 500 pings in my Discord.
state of Russia in its current
probably a rumor.
status. In 2020, a presidential election took place in Belarus. It was essentially an election that was very, very fraudulent, and the amount of people that went out outside on the streets to protest was actually absolutely insane. I was looking at those protests and just like not believing what I'm seeing. The magnitude and just the fact that this is happening in Belarus was unbelievable, because Belarus has always been considered by many people as a country that is just like the happiest with its government. Even though it's authoritarian, they never protest, ever. So like Belarus and Lukashenko is just the greatest goated leader, you know what I'm saying? But in 2020 the protests were insane. And the amount of people that I've met, people from Belarus who left there, because essentially they were participating in the process and, well, the process got squashed and now they have like a, like a life sentence or something. It is absolutely unbelievable. It feels like, half of the youth of Belarus left the country or something because of those protests. And yes, once again, the people rised up.
This is actually something I worry about having a really negative effect on the ability for progressives to win into the future. See, like, something you gotta understand is that when you just give up and you migrate out and you just give up and you just throw in the towel and you're just like, yeah, I guess I'm gonna leave, I'm gonna flee. Unless you're directly threatened, it's kind of pointless. Like, I've been hearing a lot of people who are straight, white, and cis and men talking about how they want to flee to blue states. It's like, man, I guess I understand why, because red states suck, but if you're able to stick it out, you're not going to be a substantial target in any way, shape, or form for what these red states are going to be doing. We need people who are willing to vote blue that are not directly threatened, at least, by the policies in that state or region to stay there and vote out the people who are in control there. I know for a fact that, like, one day I might, like, if my channel blows up immensely, I might move to a red state. Genuinely. Like, if I get tired of living in Seattle and my channel's blown up and I've got the finances to do that, I might consider, like, moving to, like, rural-ass Florida on the coast. Maybe even to the part of Florida where I grew up in. And, like, running for office there. Holy shit, that would be crazy. That would be fucking wild. But yeah, like, I would consider doing that because my identity is not threatened, but I would absolutely love to provide my vote to a red state, and rather than just having it get, basically evaporated into the wall of blue of an already blue state. So yeah, like, personally, I would love to be able to live that, but I currently live in Seattle. The current issue is that people on the left who are not affected are absolutely dipping out. And this mindset expands everywhere, like even online. There was this big wave. It didn't affect me as much, obviously, but like there was this big wave of big content creators that made progressive content, like David Pakman and Sam Cedar, who just got like massive sub drops for like days straight after Trump won the election, because so many progressive content viewers were just dipping out and retiring from watching progressive content after Trump won. And it's like, wow, this is the opposite of what the left needs to do if we're ever going to win again. We're like the left's instincts are the most counterproductive thing that we could possibly do at every single turn. It's like every progressive has like a machine that can with 100% certainty tell you exactly what you need to do to win a political movement at any given time. And whenever a choice needs to be made, every progressive like rolls that machine, like they run that machine and they get the result of like, here's what you need to do to guaranteed win, and then they do the exact opposite. That's what it feels like.
They were ready to sacrifice everything, and many people did sacrifice everything, but it failed, and that just happens, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean that these people deserve to be in an authoritarian country. It doesn't mean that these people deserve to be ruled by maniacs, right? It doesn't mean that they're genetic slaves or whatever. That, once again, I never question an authority because it's like in their genetic...
Yeah, I've actually considered looking into moving to PA. I've got some friends there too, and PA is pretty nice if you live in like a nice like little rural town. Like a little bit inland, where that is where my friends there live. I've thought about it. Some, like, I don't know. It's just sort of like an idea. I really like it here, so it's hard to convince me to move. I'd have to visit and really enjoy it and be like, man, this mogs Seattle. And then I'd want to move, but Man, I've always wanted to live in the Pacific Northwest, so it's gonna take a lot to convince me to move from here. Yeah, that's the point. I would want to move to a swing state ideally, and the only swing state I can imagine moving to would be Pennsylvania.
Code or something, you know. No. There's also Hong Kong, for example, right? That also failed. There's an endless amount of these examples because unfortunately, real life is not a Marvel movie, it's not a comic book, it's not a story, it's not a Hollywood film. A lot of people are basing their expectations on what they see in movies. No, the good guys don't always win. And they don't always magically get the one-up over the bad guys at the very end of the story. That doesn't always happen. And right now I feel like a lot of us in the world are collectively feeling like we've all essentially kind of failed at certain stages, and we've basically answered the worst timeline, and now we feel collectively powerless about
I genuinely think, like, 2000 might have been the point where we entered the worst timeline. I think we actually died when Y2K happened, and we're in hell. Do you get, like, think about it. Y2K. This thing, it's like, oh my god, the year 2000, we're all gonna die. The apocalypse doesn't happen, alright? Everything stays normal, right? I was born in 2003. Yeah, you're just a construct of hell. You're not real. And so, like, what happens? Al Gore loses, right? 9/11 happens. The Patriot Act goes down. Iraq War goes down. We, like, then continue to have fuckery and fuckery after fuckery up until the financial crash of 2007, 2008. We get a little bit of stability and chill times under Obama. But even at the end of that, things are already getting crazy. You know, Obama's last term, or last year, was 2016 after all. So we got a little brief reprise with Obama. And then we enter 2016 and, you know, you know the rest. Dude, Harambe died too, on top of that. So I think we've just been in hell since we all died in the year 2000 at midnight. Yeah, no, this is a really lame hell, Noct, I gotta say. It is quite the lame hell.
Essentially not being able to do for this world what we want to do, to solve the problems that we'd like to solve, to stop the genocides.
I was born in 1999.
We feel powerless. And this applies basically to most citizens of most countries, right? But also, once again, because I'm Gen Z, I want to talk about us in particular. Gen Z, in my opinion, is kind of the ultimate powerless generation. And I feel like instead of bringing each other down and saying that, you know, you guys suck because you didn't manage to overthrow, you know, your tyrannical emperor or whatever, or, you know, saying these guys actually deserve to be ruled by, you know, once again, tyrannical authoritarian maniacs because they just don't know any better and they've never, you know, had an opportunity to live any other leader, so they just don't have a chance. Please try to be kinder and stop doing that and just realize that all of us are in it together, and all of
that is a good message, because literally it applies to every group involved in the discussion we've had throughout this entire segment. From the Israelis to the Palestinians to the Russians, like, it is just, there are a shitload of, like, normal, fine people who are just civilians that are not in favor of, or frankly, even if they were, they should not be subject to the, you know, violence of war. And there are awful leaders, both. You've got Hamas and its leaders, which are awful. Their allies, the Houthis, and their leaders, which are awful. And Hezbollah, which is also awful. You've got Israel, who's got its awful leaders. And then you've, like, and you know, the civilians are caught in between. And people on either side of the issue, if they have, like, a preference for one side, or they're just, like, loyalists to one side of this issue, the same reasons why they argue their side is right, they don't apply that same standard to the other side. They don't apply the standard to, like, children born in Israel that, like, they had no control or bearing over the fact that their country's leadership is evil. They don't apply that same standard. Like, Zionists don't apply that standard to the Palestinians in Gaza, who weren't even born when Hamas took power, and or even give any leeway to the fact that Hamas's taking power in the first place was already of strenuous argument of popularity among the Palestinian people. And then on the other end of things, you've got people who, mostly like white American, college kids here in America, who argue that, obviously the same point that I just argued, but then they don't apply that standard to the kids born in Israel. It's like, it's so frustrating. The same goes for Russia, right? Russia has awful leadership, evil oligarchs running things, but there are plenty of good people in Russia. When we talk about Russia interfering with our politics and Russia is bad, Russia is a authoritarian country, we're not talking about its people, we're talking about the people controlling its people. Like, good lord, it's pretty straightforward stuff. I do think we need to encourage a lot more empathy within the left to that degree, where it's like, yeah, stop monolithicizing, or whatever term there is for this practice, countries. They're just like the country you live in, which you may hate, but you would never want it to be bombed because the majority or a significant amount of it has politics you disagree with, right? You know? And nor would you want your country dissolved and everybody in it deported to, I don't know, wherever their, like, family history goes back to. It's such a bizarre thing. I don't know how we got from, like, the powerless generation to talking about, like, genocide, but we did it, guys. We made it through. We made it through the segment. We did it, guys. We did it. If you enjoyed this segment, which, to be honest, because there are a lot of Hassan cucks in the audience, there are a good few people who probably didn't, make sure you leave a dislike if you're one of those people. And leave a like if you enjoyed it, as every single thumbs up helps to push my content in the algorithm, like casting a blue ballot, forcing YouTube to show my stuff to more people. I really do appreciate it, every single one of you who go out of your way to do that. It means so much on my videos and streams, as does commenting as well, which boosts the effects of likes, as does subscribing and ringing the bell icon to turn on all notifications so that YouTube actually tells you when I go live or upload a new video. And of course, make sure, if you have not already, that you follow my social medias linked down below and join my fan Discord, where once a week on Fridays I host all sorts of events like call-in streams, watch parties, and gaming events. And of course, if you want to get announcements for everything, even when YouTube is glitching, my Discord's good for that too. Finally, though, if you want to support me directly and you can afford it and you feel like it, most importantly, then consider helping me keep the lights on and a roof above my head here at the Xander Hall Studio by donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or supporting me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, Patreon, or buying merch through the Streamlabs link down below. Regardless of how you support the stream, though, I really do appreciate it. And as always, have a good one.